Malik Jennings had walked this route so many times it had become muscle memory, hands buried in hoodie pockets, boots thudding softly against the slick pavement of Portside's industrial district. Night had turned the city into a watercolor of mist and neon, and the rain fell in sheets, steady and cold. But this time, just beyond the corner where the alley split behind the bakery, something changed. A figure stood beneath a flickering street lamp, hair soaked to her scalp, arms wrapped tight across her chest. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring into the dark like it might offer answers she wasn't ready to hear. Malik slowed. Not cautious, just respectful. "You okay out here?" he asked, voice low but clear. She flinched like she hadn't noticed him until that moment. Her eyes were sharp, not scared, but guarded. The kind of look people wore when they'd run out of options but still had their pride. "I'm not looking for handouts," she said, and even under the rain, he heard the fracture in her tone. Malik didn't argue. He just nodded toward the faded row houses 2 blocks east. "Didn't say you were, but I've got heat, dry clothes, and a couch that doesn't ask questions." She didn't move, didn't speak. But she looked over her shoulder like something was chasing her, something she wasn't ready to name. Then she looked at him again, uncertain. He turned without waiting, walking slow. "Up to you." For a few seconds, the only sound was rain on metal and concrete. Then came the soft slap of sneakers behind him, hesitant at first, then quicker, as though she was afraid of what would happen if she stopped. They walked in silence through the back streets of Portside, past dark storefronts and shuttered windows, until they reached a narrow 2-story building with peeling trim and an old porch light glowing like a promise. Malik unlocked the door with quiet precision and gestured inside. "Keep your shoes by the mat," he said. "My kid's a light sleeper." She didn't ask questions, just slipped inside, trailing wet footprints across the tile. The space was small but clean, lived in, with a throw blanket on the couch and crayon drawings taped crookedly to the fridge. Malik handed her a towel from the hallway closet and a hoodie faded from too many washes. "Bathrooms down the hall. Water takes a second to heat up, but it gets there." She disappeared behind the door without a word, and he returned to the kitchen, putting on a kettle out of habit more than necessity. By the time she re-emerged, the hoodie clinging to her like armor, Malik had left a mug of tea on the coffee table and a folded blanket at the edge of the couch. No questions, no pressure, just a yellow sticky note in clean handwriting. "Try to rest. I'm down the hall." She stood staring at it for a long moment, unmoving, the steam from the tea curling up like something sacred. She didn't sit. Not right away. It had been so long since anyone offered her anything without strings that her body didn't quite know how to respond, but eventually she sank into the couch, slowly, like it might vanish if she moved too fast. The room was still. Outside, the rain tapped against the window with the gentleness of someone asking permission to enter. She pulled the blanket over her knees and clutched the tea like a lifeline, her eyes flicking toward the hallway where Malik had gone. No sound came from beyond the crooked door. Just silence, and the soft creak of old floorboards adjusting to the weight of a new presence. She hadn't planned to stay. She hadn't planned anything at all. But in this quiet, unexpected moment, her breath came a little easier than it had in weeks. Malik didn't sleep. He lay in bed on the other side of a thin wall, one ear tuned to the occasional rustle of the couch, the small clicks of someone shifting in unfamiliar space. His daughter Lena curled beside him under her rainbow quilt, her tiny palm resting against his ribs. He stayed still, thinking not about danger or regret, but about the woman who now slept in his living room. No name, no story, just the kind of sadness in her eyes that you didn't fake. He'd taken in strays before, but never with Lena in the next room. Still, something in her had asked for help without saying a word. And he'd answered. If you felt something in this moment, let us know. Drop a comment below with the name of your city. Give this story a like if you believe kindness matters, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. The couch creaked softly as Alyssa shifted under the blanket, her body curled into itself like someone expecting the worst. The room around her was unfamiliar, too quiet to be dangerous but too kind to trust. She kept her shoes close, just in case. Even the borrowed hoodie felt like it belonged to someone else's past, someone whose absence was still folded into the seams. She didn't know why she'd followed him. She wasn't in the habit of trusting men who appeared out of rainstorms offering shelter, but there had been no threat in Malik's voice, no agenda in his eyes, just space, and maybe for tonight that was enough. Down the hall, a door clicked gently. She sat up, heartbeat quickening, but Malik didn't return. Instead, a soft rustle came from the kitchen. A minute later, the scent of something warm floated into the living room, instant oatmeal maybe, cinnamon and heat. The kind of thing that reminded her of quiet Sunday mornings from a life she didn't get to keep. A paper napkin, a spoon, and a small bowl appeared on the table, left without a word. He didn't try to talk, didn't expect thanks, just offered comfort like someone pouring water into dry soil. She stared at the food for a while before picking up the spoon. It wasn't about hunger, it was about permission. And as she ate slowly, she realized no one had made her feel allowed in a long time. The warmth in her chest had nothing to do with the temperature of the oatmeal. It was the realization that for the first time in weeks, she wasn't on guard. Not entirely. After the bowl was scraped clean, she stood and padded quietly to the kitchen. The faucet squeaked as she rinsed it, something automatic, respectful. Malik looked up from the table where he was scribbling something into a spiral notebook. He didn't say a word, just offered a slight nod, like a signal that she didn't have to explain. The silence wasn't awkward. It was intentional, a truce. "I'll sleep on the floor if that's better," she said, voice small but clear. Malik's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Blanket's already on the couch," he replied simply. "You're good where you are." She didn't argue, but something in her posture relaxed. A tiny shift, a breath that didn't come from fear. She stood in the doorway a moment longer, unsure if she was supposed to say goodnight, unsure if those customs still applied when you were a ghost in someone else's life. Back on the couch, the blanket felt less like a shield and more like a boundary she was allowed to cross. She tucked it under her chin and stared at the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the soft patter of rain beginning again, familiar sounds made unfamiliar by the absence of danger. No footsteps pacing outside her door, no locked windows, just quiet. And a man down the hall who had offered her space without a story. She didn't know his last name, didn't know his job or why he'd opened his door to someone he didn't know, but she understood this. Malik hadn't looked at her like she was broken. He'd looked at her like someone who deserved to rest, and that was harder to process than any cruelty she'd escaped. Somewhere around 3 a.m., she drifted off, not with the panicked exhaustion of someone hiding, but the heavy calm of someone allowed to stop running. When her breathing evened, Malik finally closed the notebook and exhaled a breath he didn't know he was holding. His house hadn't held another adult in a long time, but this presence didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like a beginning, though neither of them had the language for that yet. Morning came gently, no alarm, no shouting, just the subtle shift of light against the worn curtains and the quiet clink of dishes from the kitchen. Alyssa stirred, the blanket tangled around her legs, the borrowed hoodie bunched beneath her chin. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then her eyes landed on the crayon drawing taped above the light switch. 2 stick figures and a rainbow. The memory returned like a soft wave. Rain, a man's voice, a couch that didn't come with expectations. She sat up slowly, her body stiff but not aching. From the hall came the light footsteps of a child, bare feet on wood. Alyssa froze. Then a small voice, bright and curious, broke the quiet. "Hi." Alyssa turned her head to find a little girl, maybe 6, holding a stuffed turtle and blinking at her like she'd discovered a new planet. "Are you a superhero?" the girl asked, head tilted. Alyssa blinked. I don't think so. Daddy says only brave people get to sleep on our couch." The girl smiled, wide and gap-toothed, as if that settled the matter. Before Alyssa could respond, Malik appeared behind the girl, dish towel in hand, eyes calm but alert. "Lena, remember what we said about waking up the guest?" She looked up at him with exaggerated guilt. I didn't wake her. She was already awake. Malik sighed with a tired kind of amusement. Still counts. Alyssa tried to stand, but he waved her off. You're fine. Breakfast's ready if you're hungry. She followed them to the small kitchen, the smell of toast and eggs filling the air. The table was already set. 3 plates, 1 booster seat. Malik slid a cup of coffee toward her. No speech, no conditions. Just the quiet rhythm of someone who'd already done this 100 times. Alyssa hesitated, then took the seat opposite him while Lena climbed up between them and immediately knocked over her juice. It splashed across the table with a dramatic flourish. Every time, Malik muttered, grabbing a towel. Like clockwork. Alyssa tensed, ready for sharp words, a raised voice, but none came. Just calm cleanup, an affectionate pat on Lena's head, and another cup poured without comment. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of small sounds, the clink of forks, Lena humming to herself, Malik buttering toast with unconscious precision. Alyssa watched him out of the corner of her eye, noticed the way his shoulders moved with ease, the way he handed her the salt without her asking, like he was used to anticipating needs. She wasn't used to that. In her world, nothing came without questions. Here, every gesture felt like an invitation to breathe. Halfway through the meal, Lena looked up and announced with all the gravity of a courtroom judge, "Your hair is cool." Alyssa blinked, startled. "Thanks. Mine's getting braids tomorrow," Lena added, tugging at her curls. "You want to help?" Malik looked at her, mildly alarmed. "Lena?" Alyssa smiled before he could finish. "I'd love to," she said, surprising even herself. And maybe for the first time in a long time she meant it. The days that followed unfolded like quiet stitches mending a frayed seam. Alyssa hadn't meant to stay past that first night. But morning turned into another, and then one more. There was no conversation about it, no agreements, no schedules. Just the unspoken rhythm of people sharing space without colliding. Malik never asked how long she planned to stay, and somehow that made it easier to remain. Each morning, the house stirred to the scent of coffee too strong and toast a second away from burning. Lena would shuffle into the living room half asleep, curl against Alyssa without asking, and mumble questions about dinosaurs or recess or if clouds had feelings. Alyssa never had answers, but she listened, and that seemed to be enough. She began doing small things, reflexive, not performative, folding the blanket before leaving the couch, rinsing her plate without prompting, making sure Lena's lunchbox had a napkin, even if it was just a paper towel folded in half. These acts weren't about proving her worth. They were her way of acknowledging that she saw the care around her and wanted to return it. Malik noticed, though he never said so. One morning, a second toothbrush appeared in the bathroom, still in its packaging. Next to it, a note in the same tidy handwriting. "Figured yours is in a bag somewhere." It was a small gesture, but it landed with the weight of a declaration. Not an invitation to stay. Just a quiet admission that he'd already made room. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of people who respected silence. Malik would come home from a shift and drop his keys in the bowl by the door. Alyssa would slide a mug of tea across the counter without speaking. Lena would chatter through dinner while Alyssa chopped vegetables with clumsy determination, her fingers still stiff from the cold outside. It wasn't efficient, it wasn't polished, but it was theirs. On weekends, Malik worked nights, and Alyssa stayed up late watching cartoons with Lena on mute, the glow from the screen softening the edges of the living room. Sometimes Malik returned to find them both asleep, Lena with her head on Alyssa's lap, Alyssa curled like a question mark beneath the blanket. He never woke them, just covered them both and sat nearby, unwinding in silence. The house had no spare bedroom, no luxury, but it had a heartbeat, a shared pulse that grew steadier with each day. And in that stillness, Alyssa found herself letting go of rituals that once felt like armor. She stopped checking the locks 3 times before bed. She stopped sleeping with one shoe on. She stopped flinching at raised voices. Because there weren't any. No one asked about the past. No one demanded a future. But somewhere between Lena's crayons and Malik's quiet offers of refilled mugs, Alyssa realized that she no longer counted the hours, that staying didn't feel like hiding. It felt like something else entirely, something she hadn't dared name yet. It started with a passing comment, Malik mentioning that a buddy at the laundromat needed help folding towels for one of the local motels. The job was nothing glamorous. But Alyssa had paused mid-sip of coffee and said, "I can do that," before she even realized the words had left her mouth. Malik didn't respond with approval or doubt, just nodded once and passed her a slip of paper with the address. The laundromat smelled like soap and steam, and too many hours spent trying to make things clean that would never feel new again. The work was mechanical: load, soap, spin, fold. No one asked her name. No one cared where she'd come from. Her fingertips turned raw by midday, and sweat clung to the back of her neck. But when her shift ended, Alyssa stood on the cracked sidewalk and felt something she hadn't in a long time: earned exhaustion. Back at the house, she dropped her bag by the door, toes aching in old shoes that had seen too many miles. She was too tired to talk, too sore to think. But there, by the mat, was a pair of clean white sneakers. No logo, no tag. Just simple, sturdy, and new. Inside one of them was a folded note. "If you're going to keep walking, you need better shoes." She didn't speak when she saw Malik in the kitchen, rinsing Lena's lunch container. She didn't need to. The shoes said enough. He didn't look up, didn't wait for gratitude, just slid a plate of leftovers across the counter and asked if she wanted extra sauce. She nodded, throat tight, sat down, ate in silence. It was the best meal she'd had in weeks. The next morning, she laced up the sneakers before dawn. They fit perfectly. She left before Malik woke, walking through the sleepy gray streets of Portside toward the laundromat, steam rising from sewer grates like ghosts lifting out of the pavement. She punched in early, tied her hair back, and got to work, not because she had to, but because someone had shown her she could. The ache in her shoulders at the end of the day felt almost holy, proof that she could contribute something, no matter how small. She was still just a name on a list. Still folding towels no one would thank her for. But when she walked home that night, her chest didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Malik never asked how the day went, but a second pair of socks appeared in her drawer the next morning. And when she found them, Alyssa didn't cry, but she came close. It happened on a Tuesday. The laundromat was quiet. Only the rhythmic thud of machines and the occasional whir of dryers filling the space. Alyssa was halfway through folding a bundle of motel linens when something slid free from the pile. A delicate gold chain slipped from between two towels, landing on the table with a quiet chime. The sapphire pendant caught the fluorescent light like a secret made visible. She froze. Before she could react, Malik, who had stopped by to drop off lunch, caught sight of it. The expression on his face shifted. Subtle but undeniable. First confusion, then a flicker of something heavier. Not judgment, not anger. Just wait. She reached for the necklace, hands trembling, her throat tight with words she didn't know how to shape. But Malik didn't ask. He just nodded slightly, lips pressed thin, and turned away. The space between them stretched, not with silence, but with something unspoken and sharp. That night they walked home in a quiet that didn't feel peaceful. Malik's steps were slower, his shoulders tighter. Alyssa tried to speak once, just his name, but the syllables died before they reached the air. At home, Lena greeted them with a drawing, proudly pointing to the stick figures holding hands under a scribbled sun. Alyssa smiled too wide. Malik nodded and said it was beautiful, but the warmth was missing. Dinner was quiet. Lena talked. They listened. The usual laughter, the small inside jokes, the eye contact, it all slipped through the cracks like spilled water. Alyssa felt it more than saw it. Malik didn't pull away physically, but the ease, the unspoken trust, they'd shifted. She knew why. And it had nothing to do with the necklace itself. It was what it represented. The life she hadn't explained, the one she carried in silence. That night she lay awake on the couch, the necklace tucked beneath the hoodie, her fingers wrapped tight around it. She wanted to tell him the truth, that it wasn't stolen, that it was a parting shot from a life she didn't want. But the words were stuck behind years of being disbelieved, misunderstood, controlled. Malik wasn't like the others, but she didn't know if even he would stay once he knew the whole story. Malik didn't avoid her the next day, but he didn't linger either. His presence was polite, measured. The easy familiarity had been replaced by caution. Alyssa hated it, not because he blamed her, but because he didn't. That made it worse. He gave her space, but not distance, kindness, but not warmth. And in the absence of confrontation, something colder settled in. Disappointment, quiet, patient, and unforgiving. Lena didn't notice the shift. She kept coloring, kept pulling Alyssa into games, kept asking about braids and superheroes. But Alyssa felt the pressure building behind every quiet dinner and every non-question Malik didn't ask. And she knew, sooner or later, the silence would cost more than the truth ever could. The first sign came in the form of a stranger's shadow stretching across the laundromat floor. Alyssa didn't look up right away, too focused on the rhythm of folding. But then a voice cut through the low hum of machines. "Well, look who finally came home." She turned. Her blood ran cold. He stood casually, phone in hand, smirk carved into his face like a brand. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be threatening. His presence alone did the damage. "Daddy's been looking for you," he said, lifting his phone to snap a photo before she could move. Alyssa backed away instinctively, hands shaking, mouth dry. Malik appeared from the back like a storm with no thunder, calm but coiled. He stepped between them without hesitation. "She doesn't want to talk to you," he said, voice low and final. The man's eyes narrowed. "You think you know who she is?" Malik didn't blink. "I know who she's trying to be." What followed wasn't loud. The man didn't scream. Malik didn't raise his fists, but the tension cracked like glass. The intruder leaned in close, muttered something Alyssa couldn't hear, and gave one last smile before walking out, the door chime ringing like a warning bell. They left everything behind. The folding, the machines, even Malik's paycheck, still sitting untouched by the time clock. Out the back door, through the alley, across 2 blocks of silence that buzzed louder than any city noise. They didn't speak until Malik picked Lena up early from school, mid-nap, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. Mrs. Soto from next door took her with a nod, no questions asked, just quiet understanding. Then they were in the truck, engine humming beneath them like a second heartbeat. Alyssa stared at Malik's arm where a fresh bruise bloomed just below his elbow. "He grabbed you," she said, her voice barely audible. Malik didn't answer, just kept driving. At a red light, she tried again. "You didn't have to get involved." He glanced at her, his eyes tired but steady. "That's not how I'm built." The words landed somewhere deep, past defense, past pride. She turned away, ashamed, knowing this wasn't just about that man. It was about the things she hadn't said, the truths she'd tucked behind guarded eyes. The necklace, the silence, the weight she'd forced Malik to carry without even giving him the tools to understand it. When they pulled onto their street, Malik's hand moved instinctively toward her arm. "Something's wrong," he said. She saw it too, the black car idling outside the house, sleek and clinical, like it didn't belong anywhere near this street. 2 men in suits flanked the porch like statues. She didn't need to see his face to know. She felt it in her bones before the door opened. Winston stood there, silver hair pristine, coat tailored, disdain wrapped in restraint. He took in the peeling trim, the cracked sidewalk, the mismatched curtains in the window. "Emma," he said, her real name, the one she'd buried. "Get in the car." Malik stepped forward. "You her father?" Winston didn't look at him. I'm the man responsible for her future. Malik's jaw clenched. She's not property. She's not meant for this. Winston snapped, eyes sweeping the modest house like it was infested. You think she belongs here? Alyssa, no, Emma, stepped between them. Her voice was quiet but firm. I do. Winston's expression didn't change. This is where you ran, not where you belong. Malik turned to her, eyes searching. You don't have to go. She looked at him, then at Lena's drawing still taped to the glass, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Yes, she said. I do. No one forced her, but she stepped into the car anyway. Not because she wanted to, because she didn't know how not to. Malik didn't try to stop her, and that somehow hurt most of all. Malik didn't expect to see her again. But when Lena fell ill and the ER demanded a deposit he couldn't pay, Emma walked in, rain-soaked, silent, and calm. I've got it, she said, handing over her card. No questions, no drama, just choice. Later, she stood in her father's glass penthouse, facing the man who thought love was a contract. She spoke quietly about pancakes, a child's laugh, a man who never asked for her past. You think that's enough? He asked. It's everything, she replied. Then she walked away. For good. The next morning, Malik opened the door. Emma stood there holding a paper bag. Blueberry muffins, she said. For Lena. I'm not here for the night. I'm here to stay, if you'll let me. Behind him, Lena whispered, Are you staying forever? Emma pulled her close. Yeah, kiddo. Forever sounds right. 2 months later, their truck-turned-grill sat at the park every Saturday. Malik took orders. Emma cooked. Lena handed out napkins like treasure. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes, that's enough. This story is about how the smallest acts, kindness, silence, trust, can rebuild a life. Some people don't want saving. They want to be seen. That's what stays. What moment hit you the hardest? Drop your city in the comments, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that stay with you long after the video ends. This story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental.